Welcome to the history of Saban Entertainment. All right, we're going to be talking about cartoon music, anime imports, live action nonsense, and some really crazy corporate intrigue. Can everybody hear me good? Excellent. All right, let's get this show underway. So only true millennials will remember these corporate logos from their childhood. So, these are two of the main logos for Saban Entertainment back in the day. And before we get started, I'm your host. My name is Kurt, a.k.a. The Great SG. You can find me online at most of those places. I am the editor for a podcast called Ranger Splain that is hosted by my partner Sid and their best friend Ashley. They're going to splain some Rangers to you and Power Rangers accessories as well. Check us out on anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're here, we're queer, and we're talking about Rangers. Anyway, so let's get into about this company, Saban Entertainment. Who were they? Saban Entertainment existed from about 1980 to 2002, founded by a man named Heim Saban. Started out as music producers for cartoon series in the early 80s and kept up with that. And did openings for companies like DIC Animation, Filmation, Ruby Spears, Marvel Productions, etc. They also were a distributor for numerous children's shows in both the US, France, and all over the world. A lot of these were, of course, franchise adaptations and anime imports, and we'll be talking about a lot of those throughout this panel. They also did live-action TV shows and TV films, and even theatrical stuff. So let's get into, first off, some things we are not going to be covering here. Explain why. First off, we are not going to be talking about Saban Sailor Moon. The reason for that, this was not actually made by Saban. This has been a misnomer. This was made by a company called Toon Makers and Renaissance Atlantic, who Renaissance Atlantic did work with Saban on a lot of stuff like Power Rangers, and that seems to be where the confusion came. Earlier last year, somebody found the full pilot and has made it available online, so if you want to waste 17 minutes on like a really bad failed pilot, I mean, you could do worse with doozy bots, but this thing's out there and available now. All right, some other things we're not going to be talking about. Is Power Rangers or Super Sentai better? Well, it doesn't matter because my thought is watch your own preference is okay. Seriously, you can buy so many tokusatsu shows and even Power Rangers on DVD and Blu-ray now. It's like, if you're a tokusatsu fan, this is like a great golden age to like be buying shows. So Shout Factory, Discotheque, Mill Creek, you can get all sorts of great toku stuff from them. And we're also not going to be talking about Furbus. In case you didn't know, Furbus is this horrible monstrosity from Saban's Masked Rider, this awful DuckTales monstrosity. Furbus is on the screen right now, isn't he? Ah, go away. All right. Anyway, let's talk about Heim Saban right quick. He was the founder of Saban Entertainment. He was born in Alexandria, Egypt in 1944. His family moved to Israel in the mid-50s during Egypt's expulsion of their Jewish population. Terrible, terrible thing. Now, he spent time in going in and out of school and dropped out of trade school as a teenager and found that he'd rather do music instead. So he became the bassist for an Israeli rock band known as the Lions of Judah in the late 60s. So how this came about, well, he saw a music venue, and he's like, their live band's crappy. So he went up to the owner. He's like, hey, I can bring you a better band. And the owner said, deal. He didn't have a band at the time. So he looked up in the papers and found a band that was looking for a member. And he's like, hey, I got us gigs. And they're like, okay, cool. I don't know how to play anything. It's like, that's okay. We'll just have you pretend to play bass. He eventually did learn to play instruments, though. Like he is known for, still to this day, taking guitars with him on his business trips and such. And afterwards, though, he didn't stay in the band long. They would go on to release a single in the UK and even perform on I don't believe it was Top of the Pops, or Grey Whistle Test, one of their other music showcase shows in the time. Footage lost to time. But he had left the band by then and just became a concert promoter in Israel afterwards. Eventually, he would move to France in the early 70s and still continue in the music business there. And he founded his own record label, Saban Records, in France around 1979. Now, how did that get in there? Look, the man's a billionaire. You do terrible things when you have that much money, let's be honest. Anyway, here's some photos of the Lions of Judah. You can see Heim Saban right here there as a young man in his very early 20s. And on the right there was one of their few singles that they released in the UK. By that point, they'd gotten themselves a British singer to work with them, but the band just didn't go anywhere. Anyway, let's talk a bit about some of Saban's partners in music, because he's had a number of them over the years. The first one is Shuki Levy. Levy was also originally from Israel and had moved to France, and he was more of the main composer for music for Saban Productions. He had a short career as a duet singer with his former partner Aviva in the early 70s, and the best I could describe this music as is, even cornier, Bad, Sonny and Cher at their lowest. Oh, now how did that get in there? All right, someone else I do want to mention, though, is Noam Kaniel. Noam Kaniel was a child singer that Saban discovered on the streets of Tel Aviv and brought him to France, and he became a popular child singer in the mid-'70s and continued on through his teens as a singer there. And Saban produced his biggest hit, Goldorak, you see here, which was the French opening for the anime series Grendizer, UFO Grendizer, as it's known in Japan. And Noam, these days, he is still involved in the music business and does a lot of music for kids shows like Code Lyoko, Miraculous Ladybug, and also did the Nickelodeon Neo Saban era Power Rangers music, too. Now, here's a performance of Noam as a teenager singing the Goldorak theme.
Il traverse tout l'univers aussi vite que la lumière. Qui est-il? D'où vient-il? Formidable robot des temps nouveaux. Il jaillit du fond de la mer, il bondit jusqu'à Jupiter. Qui est-il? D'où vient-il? Ce terrible géant des nouveaux temps. C'est Goldorak, le grand Goldorak.
That's about all I'm going to show of that right now. Look, it's a full-length song performance. You can find that on YouTube if you want. But hey, he had a hit single at 16. I was just on the internet. Anyway, so Saban saw that from that song being a hit, he's like, hey, there's something here to do in theme songs for animation and children's shows and stuff. So he decided to meet up with a recently formed studio called DIC Entertainment. This was a animation company formed in France by Jean Chaplin in 1979. There's him. They would later found an American branch in 1982, led by a man named Andy Hayward, seen here. Now, what Saban did was he formed a music partnership with them in 1981 and pretty much went up to Chaplin and said, hey, you're making cartoons, you need music, I'll provide the music. And they're like, okay, what's the deal? I keep the publishing rights and you make the cartoons. They're like, okay, that sounds good. We're getting free music, but you can make your own money off of it by selling the records of the theme songs and such. This made Saban a lot of money at the time. Now, Saban would later become an international distributor for DIC's library in 1986 when they started moving into not only doing cartoon music, but releasing their own shows. Now, around this time, Andy Hayward had kind of pulled a coup in DIC Entertainment. He is also the man responsible for DIC's reputation at the time for being known as do it cheaply. Underpaying animators, doing work very fast. And he had bought out the majority of shares and taken over the company from Jean Chaplin. So when Saban decided, hey, we'll be the international distributor for DIC's library outside of France internationally, Saban told him, I got somebody who's willing to buy this up from me. And what it turned out, and what Hayward didn't know, is that this company that was set up to buy these distribution rights from Saban after they bought them from DIC was a company formed by Jean Chaplin, which caused a huge rift between Heim Saban and Andy Hayward for years. They have talked in interviews about their feuds and stuff, although Hayward has said it's yeah, we weren't getting along, but when my father died, Saban did send me a flower basket. So a lot of corporate intrigue here in making cartoons, apparently. And now Saban and Levy would generally be credited as composers for all this music for cartoons they did. Usually, though, a lot of these were being mostly done by Levy, but there were other composers under Saban, friends of his he had brought over from Israel and France to do music. And so a lot of them would just be paid a company salary. Meanwhile, Saban was making all the money off the royalties off of their work. That's how he made his money. And sometimes in these, Saban would also go under a name usually for lyrics as kusamashi, as well as another way to get himself an extra royalty credit. And this did make him, it made Levy a good bit of money too, since his name was on there, but Saban was the one really making all the money off these people's back. Now, we're going to talk about one of the first shows that Saban did music for DIC. And if you came here at the very beginning, the first one they did was a co-production with the studio TMS, Tokyo Movie Shinza, called Ulysses 31. It's the Odyssey in Space. Their follow-up project they would do was for another DIC collab with a Japanese animation studio, Studio Pro. And this is one I consider one of the best underlooked cartoons of the 80s.
Children of the sun, see your time has just begun. Searching for your ways through adventures every day and night. With the condor in flight, with all your friends in tow, you search for the cities of love. Wishing for the cities of love. Someday we will find the cities of gold. Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. Cities of gold. Do-do-do-do-do. Cities of gold. Someday we will find the cities of gold.
All right, so if you're a kid who had Nickelodeon in the mid-'80s, you might remember the Mysterious Cities of Gold. There's Ulysses 31 and also Mysterious Cities. Mysterious Cities of Gold is a show that is very much worth seeking out if you enjoy a fun little adventure show. The dub is kind of corny because it is of its time, but it's a fun little show about a boy named Esteban and his friends Teo and Tao who go on in the 1500s who sail across to the New World in South America and go on sorts of fun adventures. What a wonderful little show. I just highly recommend seeking that out. And these were co-productions where in Japan they had their own soundtrack and everything, and that was completely redone for the French versions, and then those tracks were imported when these shows were eventually brought over to the US. Now, as I mentioned, these were some of the first works Saban and Levy did for DIC, but Mysterious City of Gold wouldn't make it over here until 1985, Ulysses 31 around the same time. So those would come a bit later. As for the first show, many people would hear of Saban and Levy music here in the US. Well, it'll be this next series. So yeah, that is, of course, the classic and cartoon Inspector Gadget. Pretty much was the DIC's flagship show and character for most of the 1980s. because this became their biggest runaway hit. I mean, the show debuted in television syndication in 1983 and continued in reruns for decades. I think you could still find some channels showing Inspector Gadget in reruns. Of course, best known for being voiced by the late, great Don Adams. And this was also the show, he's a bumbling detective who's his dog Brain and niece Penny. The first voice role for Cree Summers when she was a teenager, still doing voice acting to this day, helps save the day while Gadget gets the credit. It's very silly and of its time, but you actually go back and listen to it. There's a lot of fun music in that show, especially if you just like wild synth stuff. There's a lot there. And this was also at least for the first season, a co-production between DIC and Canada's Nelvana Studios. And most of the episodes of that season were animated by Tokyo Movie Shinza. Now, this is just something I find fun to mention in this since we had the time to do it. This was also probably the first time music by Levy and Saban was sampled in a hip-hop song. Some of y'all might know this.
Excuse me, Dougie Fresh.
Yes!
Have you ever seen a show with fellas
This
on
is
the
the
mic
show
with
by Dougie
1 minute
Fresh
rhymes
and
that
Slick
don't
Rick.
come out right? They bite.
They never right.
That's not polite. Am I lying?
No, you're quite right.
Well, tonight, on this very mic, you're about to hear.
We swear, the best star rappers of the year.
So, sure you go.
Yell,
Scream bravo.
Also, if you didn't know, this is called the show.
All right, and that's just a quick sample so you can hear the sample of the Inspector Gadget theme in that show. So DIC and Saban would continue that music partnership for a long time. So here's some other notable DIC shows Saban provided some music for, you might remember, such as The Littles. Pole Position, the first animated series based on a video game. Rainbow Bride, of course. Mask. Jason the Wheeled Warriors. And, of course, The Real Ghostbusters. And so, as I mentioned before, Shuki Levy was doing a lot of the composition for this stuff, as well as other people in the company. However, in one interview I read, there is one cartoon theme song, Heim Saban says, I wrote that one and composed it myself. And I was very fascinated to learn which one that was, and I think you will be as well.
Heathcliff, no one should terrify their neighborhood. But Heathcliff just won't be undone, playing pranks on everyone. There's a race to be on time, the competition doesn't stop. Mixing with the ladies fair, being charming, debonair. The game will reign supreme, and no one can deny. They'll make them history, and always have an alibi. So join in the jubilee. The cats are great, they'll all agree. Find in each calamity the cat's superiority. Heathcliff, no one should terrify their neighborhood. But Heathcliff just won't be undone. You should realize he can win it with you.
So, of course, that is Heathcliff and the Cadillac Cats. Am I wrong, or is that song just a banger? Like, seriously. All right, so this was actually the second Heathcliff-based cartoon series created in the 1980s. The first one in 1980 was done by Ruby Spears. This one was created by DIC, aired in syndication starting in 1984. And with this one, they not only had the Heathcliff comic character, but they also added the Cadillac Cats, who were original to the series, created by DIC, Jean Chapelain, and Bruno Bianchi. And you know what? I'm just saying, this show definitely made some of y'all furries. I'm not hating, I'm just saying, let's be real. The French for you. And speaking of in France, a lot of these theme songs, the French versions of them, actually got physical LP vinyl releases. That's a selection of them there. And these are, the music's about the same, but there are different singers. I know the Heathcliff version is sung by Noam Caniel in French. Bleh. All right, and now those are all from DIC. So here's another popular 80s cartoon theme song they did for another infamous studio, and maybe one of the biggest cartoons of the 1980s.
the masters of the universe. I am Adam, Prince of Eternia and defender of the secrets of Castle Grayskull. This is Cringer, my fearless friend. Fabulous secret powers were revealed to me the day I held aloft my magic sword and said, "By the power of Grayskull!" Cringer became the mighty Battle Cat, and I became He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe. Only 3 others share this secret. Our friends, the Sorceress, Man-at-Arms, and Orko. Together we defend Castle Grayskull from the evil forces of Skeletor.
Yeah, there's a show that needs no introduction. It's, of course, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, which Levy and Saban, as well as Erica Lane, who also worked with them, mostly on those 2 shows. They also provided all the music for She-Ra, the Princess of Power, as well. Those are the only series that Saban and Levy did with Filmation, which I would love to have been on a fly on the wall in there, because I'm sure Lou Scheimer and Heim Saban had some wonderful arguments. So, going into 1984, Saban goes into making their own series. Saban himself moved to LA in 1983 and was continuing to make deals with animation studios to do music for them, but also formed their own full company, Saban Productions. With this, they decided to move into producing their own shows. And their first production they did was a collaboration with DIC, which was a mixed live-action animated series. One that's kind of forgotten, but maybe if you were a kid in the mid-'80s, you might remember this.
Getting me going, keeping me moving on. On my system, I'm playing it on and on. People saying I'm crazy, I'm always on my own.
This is Kid Video.
I take just turn me on from my video to my radio. It's giving me rocking, it's getting me moving on. From my video to my radio.
I'm taking you to the flip side.
What happened? Ay, ay, ay. We look like cartoons.
You'll be my musical slaves forever.
What's going on here? I'll explain later. Let's go.
You gotta love it when
Kid
cartoons can
Video
just be
will
like, hey,
return.
we're not gonna explain anything, just move along with it. But yeah, this was Kid Video, the first production Saban made, and did the co-production with DIC, who provided the animation for them with the live-action segments. This was a show that focused heavily on music, being about a rock band and everything. They would mix in both original songs by the Kid Video band as well as by other artists. So licensing hell to get this released, you betcha. And so the Kid Video ran for about, I believe, 1-2 seasons, very short-lived show, had a couple of VHS releases. What's really interesting, though, is that the Kid Video band had a physical album released only in Israel. Supposedly the band also did a tour there, but I couldn't find that to be confirmed, but there's the LP record cover. One little fun fact I always like to point out, the keyboardist on the left there, that is actor Robbie Rist, best known as Cousin Oliver on the Brady Bunch, who later went into voice acting, voicing Michelangelo in the live-action Ninja Turtles movies, Choji and Naruto. He does a lot of other anime roles, like the connections, they're always there. So that was their first produced show. Now, around 1985, the year after, they got into the anime game. I mean, this was a time where shows like Voltron and Robotech were happening. And with both of those shows, Voltron mixed in 2 unrelated series for to get up to have enough episodes for syndication. That was, of course, Go Lion and Dirugger 15 to make Voltron. First half was Lion Voltron, second half Vehicle Voltron. Robotech mixed in 3 shows, Super Dimensional Fortress Macross, Southern Cross, and Mospetta to make those shows. So Saban's like, hey, that seems like a good idea, so I'm going to buy up 2 unrelated giant robot animes and mix them together. And that created this nightmare.
Earth, the year 2525. A teleportation experiment goes wrong, and test pilot David Jantz is rocketed through the center of the galaxy. He discovers an alternate universe caught in a life and death struggle against the tyrannical armies of Grip, led by Dark Star and his mighty cyborg Orn. When Jantz enters the hole in space, it allows Dark Star and his command ship to enter our universe and gain an oppressive foothold, leaving Orn behind to continue his conquest. 2 teams are formed to battle Grip's legions. On Earth, Dr. Chagall and his team battle Darkstar and his henchmen. In the alternate universe, Major Chance leads his rebel band against the evil battalions of Orn. Together, they are Macron 1.
This was a show called Macron 1, and have fun getting that theme out of your head. So, as you heard there from that very complicated long narration, that's what happens when you try to mix 2 shows together, and when you have a narration longer than any in Robotech, something has gone terribly wrong. This aired in 1985 on syndication. So the US version here from that theme song, mixed footage of 2 unrelated shows, Go Shogun and Shrungle. Completely unrelated, and as you could tell there, you could see that there was obviously 2 different animation styles and quality there, and I'm sure Saban is like, throw some video effects in there and transitions, the kids aren't going to notice. And yeah, 2 completely unrelated giant robot shows. Now, the European version of this show, which is easier to find episodes of, only use Go Shogun footage only. It is definitely less of a mess to watch if you're going to try to seek out this long-forgotten thing. Now, fight scenes in the original TV airings of Macron 1 were set to covers of pop song hits from the time. Saban always trying to cash in on trends. Well, there was a show called Miami Vice that was real popular at the time that used a lot of popular music in it. So they decided, we can do that too. So fight scenes in Macron 1 would be set to such hits as Beat It, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and Phil Collins' Susudio. And I'm not joking about that. I have proof. Yep. Now, as I said, those only really appeared in the TV version. Some episodes of this were released on VHS, but they cut all these covers of popular hit songs out of there. So another show stuck in licensing hell? You bet. And so Macron 1, since they did this in 85, well, Saban was in Japan for negotiating business deals and was paying attention to Japanese television, and he caught something on TV that struck his interest, seeing a live-action show of superhero types in costumes. And he's like, I should bring this over. So he made a pilot for a thing called Bioman. Now, Bioman was a pilot that they created in 1986. And here's the cast for that pilot there. Most notably, you see Mark Dacascos there. And some of these character names might sound a little familiar to you because they would later get repurposed into Power Rangers. Also of note there, Miguel Nunez, who from, what was it, Friday the 13th Part 5 and Return of the Living Dead. And Tricia Fisher, I believe, is Carrie Fisher's half-sister. Yeah. This pilot, though, has never been released outside of being shown to like TV executives and stuff. They adapted it from the Super Sentai series Bioman of the same name. And what they did was they just used the action footage of the Japanese show, put in new scenes with the American actors, dubbed over the Japanese action footage. Every network that Saban took this to, they're like, this is horrible. This looks awful. It's cheap. It's violent. We're not airing this. And so he just shelved it for a while. But this will come back in a bit. Now, I do want to talk about some other failed attempts at live-action shows Saban tried here going into the late 80s. A lot of game shows here for in syndication and on NBC. We had I'm Telling, a show called Treasure Mall, Couch Potatoes, which is just best remembered for being hosted by Mark Summers briefly around the time he started Double Dare. And then there were some other like variety shows they tried. There was a thing called Too Hip for TV, which was kind of going for an MTV vibe, a show aimed at teenagers, having music guests on there. And the show was hosted by pre-SNL alum Colin Quinn and Ahmet Zappa, one of Frank Zappa's sons when he was a teenager. Probably the most famous guest they had on there was the Red Hot Chili Peppers. This only lasted very briefly. It's just you can find episodes of this uploaded on YouTube. It's kind of a strange thing to see. But enough about that. Let's talk about some video game shows. And here's one I know most of you will love. Play. Oh. Come on. I'll just do it this way.
Hey, paisanos, it's the Super Mario Brothers Super Show.
With the Mario Brothers and plumbing's our game. We're not like the others who get all the fame. If your sink is in trouble, you can call us on the double. We're faster than the others, you'll be hooked on the brothers. Hooked on the brothers. Yo, you're in for a treat, so hang on to your seat. Get ready for adventure and remarkable feats. You'll meet Koopas and Troopers, the princess and the others. Hanging with the plumbers, you'll be hooked on the brothers. To the
So yeah, that is of course the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. This was one of DIC's animated series that Saban and Levy, of course, provided all the music for. Aired in syndication began in 1989. This was a series that would have the Mario Brothers show for 4 days of the week, and on Fridays you'd get the Zelda series with Mr. Excuse Me Princess himself, Link. Of course, hosted by Captain Lou Albano playing Mario there in the live-action framing segments where they have a lot of it's very fun going back there. It's like, okay, here's an episode with Elvira, there's Sergeant Slaughter, here's Maurice LaMarche playing Inspector Gadget. Very weird, silly show. Now, another animated series that they, video game based, that they provide the music for was Captain N, the Game Master. Animated series with Nintendo characters, of course. Ran on NBC from 1989 to 91. And another one that's less remembered was a series called Video Power. This ran from 1990 to 92 and featured a cartoon segment called The Power Team featuring characters from Acclaim video games. The first season of this show was more of a kind of an anthology show. You'd have live action segments hosted by a guy named Johnny Arcade, who would give game tips and stuff and talk about coming up video games, usually Acclaim titles. Then the second season, they turned it into a game show format, changed it up. Pre-Nick Arcade. Now, time to talk about some more of the kids' shows from Japan that they had been importing over the years. One of the early ones they did after Macron 1 was a series called Maple Town. Yeah, this was a Toei series from 1986, and it was Toei's attempt to cash in with their own knockoff version of the popular animal in like kind of classic clothing toy line, Sylvania Friends. And with the U.S. version of this, Saban added some live-action framing sections with a lady as Miss Maple who would introduce the show. This one ran on Nickelodeon. It was also, they imported Little Women. This was a Nippon animation series, as well as The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Both of these were Nippon Animation's World Masterpiece Theater series. Another one they did was a weird anime version of Pinocchio from Tatsunoko Pro from back in the 70s. This came to Fox Kids in the early 90s briefly, as did Saban's attempt to cash in on the popularity of Disney's Little Mermaid with a syndicated TV anime version they released in 91. I believe this one was also made by Toei, and it ended up just getting completely beaten in the ratings by the Little Mermaid TV show that Disney produced themselves. I believe you can still actually find the dub versions of Tom Sawyer and Little Women. Those have been on Amazon before on their streaming, so if you did want to go and watch those shows, you can there. Now, another show that was a big part, at least when I was a kid, on Nick Jr. in the early 90s. A lot of you probably remember this one as well. Also based on classical literature and fairy tales.
Hey, come along and join the fun. It's a time for fairy tales, magical kingdoms in the sun. Come along, come along. Meet friendly elves and witches too, in the world of fairy tales. Enchanted castles wait for you. Come along, to where life is a fantasy, and every story ends so happily. This is a place where dreams come true, a world of fairy tales for you.
All right, that was, of course, Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics. Aired on Nickelodeon in the early 90s, originally as part of their special delivery, and then later on Nick Jr. Also, I believe, supposedly it aired on HBO before that in 1988, but I've not been able to fully confirm that. Another show some of y'all might remember that also aired on Nick Jr. was Noozles. This was also by Nippon Animation from 1984. This was directed by noted anime director Nobuo Ishiguro. If that name sounds familiar to you, you're probably a fan of Space Battleship Yamato, Macross, and Legend of the Galactic Heroes. One thing I want to point out with Noozles, this dub featured Heim Saban's stepdaughter, Heidi, voicing the lead character in the show. And she'd actually go on to do some anime work in the 90s, notably playing the lead girl in the Wings of Oniyamas film dub, as well as in El Hazard. Another anime import that they brought over to Nickelodeon was a little show called The Little Bits, made by Tatsunoko Pro originally in 1980. With the version that was Saban, one of the big changes they did from the Japanese version was giving every character a bit at the end of their names, possibly trying to cash in on Smurfs, I guess. And another show they released that aired on Nick Jr. was Maya the Bee. This was originally a Nippon Animation series from 1975, based on a German book by an author you do not want to look up. I'm being serious there, it's wild. And all of these were a big part of like early 90s Nick Jr. for a number of years. Now, if you saw the credits there of the Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics, there might be some names you possibly recognize. So let's talk about a couple of those people right quick. First up is Tony Oliver. He's been a voice actor since the 80s, from going back to Robotech, best known now as the voice of Lupin III in about any English dub you hear of Lupin now, and does a lot of ADR directing for a lot of anime and cartoons. There's also the late Robert Axelrod. He was a script writer and voice actor for a lot of Saban shows, best remembered as being the voice of Lord Zed in Power Rangers. Another notable name, also in Power Rangers, was Kerrigan Mahan, best known as the voice of Goldar. Another name I want to bring up is Robert B. Varon, who was a script writer on a lot of Saban shows, also worked on Robotech, But yeah, best known for playing Abe Lincoln in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but he did a lot of voice acting for Saban in the 80s. And last but not least, the ever great Barbara Goodson, voice actress in a number of cartoons in anime, and best known as Rita Repulsa. And she's still doing work to this day. All right, let's talk about some licensed adaptation cartoons. So this is stuff based on existing properties. A lot of these were very weird and short-lived shows, usually aired on NBC or some syndication for maybe 13 to 26 episodes at most. Just very strange offerings here, but we had cartoon versions of The Karate Kid, Alf, the animated series. This was a prequel where we find out Alf's name is Gordon. We also got a show adaptation of Kid and Play from the House Party films. And then this very ugly, awful adaptation of Little Shop of Horrors I remember from my childhood. This aired on a upcoming children's programming block called Fox Kids, which we're going to be talking about a bit more here in a moment. But one last cartoon, a big one on NBC, because this show outlasted a lot of those, and I just don't know why, but who remembers Camp Candy? John Candy plays a camp counselor, I guess. That sure was a cartoon I saw. Anyway, let's talk about some TV films. As I mentioned, they also started getting into doing productions for TV movies and documentaries. The first of which they did was a JFK conspiracy documentary. Moving on. Some other notable of their TV film productions they did a Phantom of the Opera 2-part TV movie. This starred Charles Dance from Game of Thrones and Alien 3 as the Phantom. There was the third Addams Family movie, a TV film starring Tim Curry as Gomez. This was also a backdoor pilot for a TV show that actually didn't happen. Lurch's actor was the only one who returned from the original films, and then none of these members except Pugsley's actor returned for the TV show that aired on Fox Family briefly. And another one, I just bring this one in because I actually watched this because I was 12 and stupid, but here's a Men in Black parody from National Lampoon's called Men in White, starring Biff from Back to the Future. Some interesting names there. You got Barry Bostwick, Ben Stein. Yeah, this sure existed. One funny thing about this movie is a lot of the background aliens in it were just Power Rangers Turbo Piranhatron costumes, I guess, that were left over. All right. So I mentioned Fox Kids there a moment ago, so let's talk about Saban's partnership with Fox Kids, and especially Margaret Loresh. Margaret Loresh was an executive producer of numerous 80s children's cartoons. She did a lot of the Hasbro productions, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Jim. Those were all produced by her. And she ended up, Muppet Babies was another one she worked on. She became the head of Fox Kids in 1990, and started working she had worked with Saban and Levy on some cartoons she produced they provided music for. And in 1992, they struck a deal together with Marvel to create some animated shows. And here's one that really needs no introduction. So yeah, that is, of course, the X-Men cartoon a lot of us know and love dearly. X-Men would be the first music work under Saban by a composer named Ron Wasserman, who we'll be talking about a little bit more too. So this Marvel deal would also lead to Saban and Levy's company also providing music for the Spider-Man animated series in 1994. Later, Saban themselves would go on to produce the short-lived Spider-Man Unlimited series that aired on Fox in 1999. Part of the reason these shows ended up ending, though, at the time was because Toy Biz and Marvel's head, Avi Arad, was clashing with Fox production on a lot of shows, made things difficult. And honestly, another moment where I would just love to have seen the shouting matches between Avi Arad and Heim Saban, because I'm sure they were legendary. But through this work together with Laresh, she went to Saban and was like, well, this is working really good for us. Do you have anything else you like? And he's like, well, I made this pilot back in the 80s, so what do you think of this? And she's like, oh, I know what this is, because back in 1983, me and Stan Lee tried to bring over the Super Sentai series Sun Vulcan, and nobody would buy it. So Saban and Laresh worked together and decided, we can make this work. So instead of adapting Bioman, they decided, well, let's adapt the current Super Sentai series and see how this works. And it took a lot of convincing at Fox and to their network affiliates to pick this up, but this would pay off huge for the both of them. And I do want to say one last time, Saban may get the credit for Power Rangers, but you can thank Margaret Laresh for that series existing. So flashback, it's 1993, you're like me, you're 7 years old, and you've been seeing ads for this show. It looks interesting. It's Monday morning, you're getting ready for school. This comes on and it blows your mind.
After 10,000 years, I'm free. It's time to conquer Earth.
Alpha, Reader's Escape. Recruit a team of teenagers with attitudes.
So yeah, there it is, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, one of the biggest live-action shows and kids shows of the 1990s. This, of course, mixed in original footage with Super Sentai series Zyuranger. This debuted in the fall of 1993, and literally this is the definition of lightning in a bottle, because it just literally became an overnight sensation. One of the highest-selling toy lines of the 90s, of course, criticized heavily at the time for its violence and fights. And you also got 2 theatrical films in 1995, an original one with the Mighty Morphin style, and then 97's Turbo. And it still continues to this day. If you were not there, you look at Power Rangers now, yeah, it's cheesy as hell. It's Saved by the Bell with karate. But at the time in the 90s, we were simple children with our sugary cereals. We ate this up. The toys were cool. I mean, you have dinosaur robots. How can you lose? And, it is one of those, the fact that it's still around to this day just really says, it's a landmark series. And this made Heim Saban a lot of money. It did not make the actors and crew much money, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, there's stories some of the cast has. I know, like Johnny Young Bosch said one time he didn't have any money for food, and Karen Ashley literally just made him a sandwich and stuff. I think Jason Narvey was living on Paul Shire's couch at one point. Yeah, and I don't want to get too much into the downer stuff. David Yost went through a lot of terrible things on the show. He's in a much better place, and you know what? R.I.P. Jason David Frank. We wish you were here. But I don't want to focus this whole panel on Power Rangers, but it's almost hard not to, because it became the big legacy of Saban Entertainment. And as I said, we had the same cast there going through for a couple of years, and as slowly over time we transitioned away, kind of following the Super Sentai format, where we started getting new characters, new cast every year. But for a while there, they continued through with the story of Zordon and the Power Rangers fighting against evil. And we still have it going today, almost 30 years later. It's crazy. The 30th anniversary is this year. All right, so because of how big Power Rangers was, Saban's like, hey, let's go back to the drawing board on that and bring over other stuff, because Toei's like, yeah, we got all these other live-action tokusatsu shows. Try those out. The first follow-up they would do is a show called, this is, of course, VR Troopers. This was adapted from 3 unrelated shows from the Metal Heroes series, Metalder, Spielbahn, and Scheider. These were all shows from the mid-'80s, so despite VR Troopers being very decently popular, not as coming close to Power Rangers, well, after 92 episodes and 2 seasons of Ryan Steele longing for his dad to come home, it just ended. They ran out of footage. They're like, we're not going to adapt anymore. It's too hard. So their next attempt was, I guess we have to talk about it afterwards, but there's a show called Kamen Rider that's real big in Japan. So Saban took their hand at Masked Rider, where instead of just doing the teenagers in karate in high school or young adults working at a newspaper saving Ryan's dad, what if a boy who's an alien bug comes to Earth and lives in a sitcom environment with fight scenes? This mostly adapted footage from Kamen Rider Black RX, which was the last TV production of Kamen Rider that aired about 7 years before it debuted. This was canceled after one short 40-episode season because, well, there really wasn't much more they could do with footage unless they started going back to older and older footage, which they probably just didn't see as viable. And the show just kind of flopped in the ratings. Even when I was a kid, I think I just fell off of Kamen Rider at around episode 20, which is kind of a shame because it means I missed out on seeing this infamous clip from the last episode of the show where Dex meets all the other Masked Riders, and their names are wrong.
Do not try to rise yet, Dex. How do you feel, young Masked Rider?
Masked Rider warriors?
Your grandfather Lexian sent us. It appears we were just in time.
Bruticon is more powerful than we imagined, but he can be defeated if we work together.
I am Masked Rider Warrior Leader at your service.
I am Warrior Commander. I am B3. I am Rider Man.
I am Masked Rider X.
I am Amazon. Strongman at your service. I am Z-Croc.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure both, shoot, I just forgot his name, never mind. I'm pretty sure that's like 3 people doing all those voices in there, but yeah, if anyone knows your classic Showa era Kamen Riders, half those names are completely off the mark. But yeah, that was Masked Rider. And then the last attempt here was, of course, Big Bad Beetleborg. Y'all excited now, but have you really rewatched this one? Because it's hard. This, of course, was Big Bad Beetleborgs and Big Bad Beetleborgs Metallics. This was adapted from 2 90s Metal Hero shows, Junko B-Fighter and B-Fighter Kabuto. And this one, they kind of went even skewed younger than even Power Rangers did, where literally the heroes of the Beetleborgs are 3 actual kids who free a phantasm ghost named Flabber, who is Jay Leno as an Elvis impersonator, I guess. And he's like, grants them a wish to become their favorite comic book characters, but then brings all the comic book villains to life, and that's how they have to fight. So you have like a weird kids horror comedy sitcom going on with action scenes. And at one point, this was around the time when this came up, is when Power Rangers Turbo was airing. And at one point, Beetleborgs is apparently even beating Power Rangers in the ratings. Like, Power Rangers nearly got canceled after Turbo. And the part of the reason, though, Beetleborgs didn't continue was, well, the next Metal Hero show, they kind of went in Toei went in a very kidified direction with giant cartoony-looking mascot characters. So it's like, well, we got no more footage to do. Oh, well. And that was the end of Beetleborgs. But throughout the 90s, even with all these shows, they were still doing anime adaptations. One interesting forgotten one is their take on Gatchaman Eagle Riders. This adapted Gatchaman 2 and Gatchaman F from the late 70s, early 80s. And this was originally released in the U.S. also under the Battle of the Planet. Gatchaman originally came over here as Battle of the Planets in the 70s. And they were trying to, I guess, cash in on Battle of the Planets nostalgia, but Battle of the Planets fans didn't care about it, and kids of the 90s didn't care about it. So it just disappeared after a while in 1995. Another one that I personally loved was Technoman. This was adapted from Tekkaman Blade, which is a great show. You should find it. This briefly aired on UPN in 95, so we never got the whole show here in the U.S., but Australia got all of it. Eventually, Media Blasters released both Technoman and Tekkaman Blade on DVD. They're out of print now, unfortunately. But here's a show a lot of you probably remember from 95 as well.
Somebody please cue that fight.
Samurai pizza cats.
Oh yeah!
Who do you call when you want some pepperoni?
Samurai pizza cats.
Right on!
They're stamping out baloney. There's Speedy Cerviche, he's the leader of the bunch.
That's right.
A heck of a fighter, makes a heck of a lunch. And little Polyester, who's never afraid
That's me.
of going into battle when the bad guys invade. Here's Guido Anchovy, a wild romantic rover. This cat gets down with a love hangover.
Here come the pizza cats.
They're so bad, they've got more fur than any turtle ever had.
Stronger than old cheese.
Stronger than old cheese.
Stronger than dirt.
Stronger than dirt.
You step on their tail.
Out of my tail.
And you're gonna get hurt.
Don't hurt me.
Samurai pizza cats.
They're fighting crime all over town.
3, 2, 1. Pizza cats are on the run.
The big cheese is the villain who's lower than low. It's a rotten shame he lives in little Tokyo. We've got a nasty bad bird and some nasty ninja crows. As soon as someone finds a script, we might begin the show. Sit right back, kick up your feet, and turn the sound up high. And if you want the full effect, go eat a pizza pie.
All right, that is, of course, Samurai Pizza Cats. So this is interesting because this was adapted from a anime series called Cat Ninja Legend Tiandi. And this dub was originally made in 1991, but it was shelved for about 4 or 5 years and didn't start airing in syndication until like 95. Which is very funny because you know what kids love is Paul Lynn impressions and references to 60s sitcoms. But this is one of those very loosey-goosey, just having fun with what the footage is kind of shows. But this is what's kind of great about today. You know, you could buy Samurai Pizza Cats on Blu-ray from Discotek. You can watch this on Crunchyroll, and you can even watch Tiandi in Japanese on, you know, it's kind of wild what's available. It's a golden age of this stuff. And yeah, it did not air here until 96. But that kind of loose type of adaptation. There's another anime we'll be talking about a little later that did something similar. But before we get to that, we got to talk briefly about Saban helping bring over Dragonball Z. Now, this was something that began airing in syndication in 96. And while Funimation was the distributor and releaser originally and had the rights to Dragon Ball Z, they were in Canada at the time before moving to Texas later on. They had struggled trying to put the original Dragon Ball in syndication and decided to go for Z with Saban's help. They got Ron Wasserman, who was doing the Power Rangers music, to provide new original music for their 50-episode slot of episodes of Dragon Ball Z. Famously, there was an episode Funimation dubbed of this where Gohan meets some orphan kids and has an adventure with them for an episode. Saban pulled that episode because they're like, no, we can't have them air an episode where kids are rebelling against adults. That'll teach them bad things. But yeah, the show failed in syndication there and did not become a hit until a couple years later when Cartoon Network picked it up. And the rest is history about Dragon Ball Z. Now, let's talk about a couple other live-action shows that Saban did. Well, they didn't have other toku to adapt, so they tried to do some of their own original stuff. Now, Samurai Pizza Cats is one of those things that they probably brought over because, well, there was this popular thing called the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So let's try our own live-action Ninja Turtles, and that was the flop that was The Next Mutation, debuted in 1997. Even had a crossover episode with Power Rangers in space. That is quite a bizarre thing to witness. Now, as for their first fully original tokusatsu-style show, if you will, was The Mystic Knights of Tir na Nog. This debuted in 1998, very loosely based, I should add, on Irish mythology. And this was filmed on location in Ireland, so there's just a lot of beautiful on-set location shooting in this series, as silly and hokey as it is. It's kind of a joy, though. Now, it only ran briefly for 50 episodes before they were planning to do another season, but because of the success Power Rangers in Space was having, bringing back Power Rangers, Saban decided, well, we're going to put our money for Mystic Knights Season 2 into our next Power Rangers and another anime series we'll talk about in a moment. But I do want to talk about the very last live-action show that Saban ever worked on, and it's this bizarre thing.
Luchadores, the faceless heroes, Lucha Libre and Mascarados, Lobo Fuerte and Turbine together, meet Villanos, champions forever. Hey!
that is Los Luchadores, a very short-lived show about 3 luchadors who are all very white. This debuted in 2001 and got quickly canceled after about 16 episodes, ending on a full cliffhanger where our heroes are frozen by the villain, who is a mad scientist who put his brain in a chihuahua. I am not making this up, by the way. But yeah, so it ends on a cliffhanger, and every episode is just wonderfully baffling and weird, and it's very obvious these actors were not wrestlers, unfortunately, because there is some bad wrestling in this show. Of note, though, is that the lead girl in the show, this was an early role for Sarah Carter, who was later on in the series Falling Skies. But yeah, only aired briefly and canceled after 16 episodes in 2001. All right, so now I'm done talking about these live-action shows, and some people in here have probably been wondering, when am I going to get to the Fireworks Factory and talking about this anime they love? So here it is.
Digimon are the champions. Digimon, digital monsters. Digimon are the champions. Change into digital champions to save the digital world. Digimon, digital monsters. Digimon are the champions. Digimon, digital monsters. Digimon are the champions. Digimon into champions. Into Ultimate. Digimon, digital monsters, Digimon are the champions. Digimon, digital monsters, Digimon are the champions. Digimon, digital monsters, Digimon.
So yeah, that is, of course, Digimon. Debuted here in 1999 as a competitor to Pokemon, but you know what? This show is still fun. It just brings me such nostalgic glee. They had a theatrical film we brought over here, which combined 3 short Japanese films all together in one in 2000. Also began with that nightmarish Angela Anaconda short we all remember and hate. One thing to note about those Digimon films, those were early works directed by Mamoru Hosoda, who has done such films as Summer Wars, Belle, and so that was a place he got his start in directing. And yes, both are good, but hey, you have your faves, we have ours. One thing I do want to point out, Digimon, you can buy this on Blu-ray now. Discotheque's Sorcery, this show looks incredible now. You can buy the English version or even in Japanese if you want. They are doing all your nostalgia-loving work there. But as for another weird and very short-lived anime adaptation experiment they tried, they decided to butcher one of my faves. And maybe some of you remember this. So very briefly, Saban attempted to help adapt for Fox Kids a very heavily edited version of the series The Vision of Escaflowne from 1996. This aired briefly in 2000 here. I think got canceled around episode 12. YTV in Canada aired the whole thing. This thing is a horrible bastardization of one of the best anime of the 90s. They literally took scenes from like the last episode of the show and moved them to like episode 5. They even skipped the first episode of the show because they're like, this is too boring. The kids won't care about this girl and her high school drama, even though the second half of that episode is a fight with a dragon. It is a baffling thing, and this edited dub, I believe, is one of those like, if somebody has the masters to it, they're not releasing it for good reason, and I don't think Sunrise wants it out either. One thing I do want to note is some of the music they kept from the original Yoko Kanno score, but they also replaced and put in their own music, including that opening done by composer Inan Zur. That name sounds familiar. Well, you're probably a fan of Dragon Age Inquisition or some of the Fallout games. He does mostly video game composing now, but he's not Yoko Kanno in my mind, so ugh. But yeah, just canceled real quickly here. Another anime they brought over, the only thing Saban ever worked on in the Transformers franchise was Transformers Robots in the Sky. This was a 2000 production anime remake, debuted in 2001 on Fox Kids. I believe this is the only animated Transformers series that's not available streaming at all. Like everything else is on Tubi except this one. So it's possibly tied up in some weird rights issues, which is really weird with Hasbro having everything now. And one last one I do want to talk about briefly, the very last anime Saban ever worked on, and that was Melancholy Nights. This debuted also in late 2001 on Fox Kids, and it would go between being on Fox Kids and on their blocks on Fox Family. Discotheque, that's their DVD cover. They've finally found all of the English dub episodes and are putting all of that out there. So if you're a fan of this weird, very silly show, you can own it now. So I mentioned Fox Family, so let's talk about the Fox Family and the Disney buyout. So in the mid-90s, Saban got in his mind to buy his own network and decided to go in with Fox to purchase the Family Channel owned by noted terrible person Pat Robertson. So the Family, that's why the 700 Club is still on the current version of that network to this day, because that was the one deal Robertson wanted. Is like, okay, you can buy my network, but I still get the 700 Club. Now, the Family Channel before Fox bought it was mostly a channel that showed reruns. This was the place your grandparents went to watch their old westerns before MeTV existed. And Fox bought it and decided, well, we can air afternoon baseball games on here. We'll air some cartoons. We'll update it. They did not get a lot of eyes on this channel and kind of really alienated the audience of people who did watch it. So Fox Family was swimming in a lot of debt by 2001. And Saban had a deal with Fox through the Fox Family and their Fox Kids block that he could cash out after 5 years. And so he decided to. And he's like, well, what can I do to cash out and get somebody to buy this failing channel? Well, he decided he was going to sell it to the one person who probably would buy it. And that is, of course, then Disney CEO Michael Eisner. It's the CEO of Disney from 1984 until 2005. How did that get in there? So at that time, when Disney decided to buy the Fox Family Channel, they purchased it for an astronomical sum of $5.3 billion, very much overvaluing the value of the Fox Family Channel. Everyone in the company at Disney is like, Eisner, you paid almost $1 billion too much for this. Why? And Saban, he might be the greatest poker player of all time, except he doesn't gamble with cards. He gambles with children's TV and networks. There is an entire book that deals with this buyout, and it is kind of wild. Brazilian courts, because this was an international deal, nearly tied up the deal for a couple of years. Saban made a call to former President Bill Clinton to get Brazil to clear the deal faster, and that happened. Wow. Yeah, the connections. And Saban himself, he profited $1.5 billion himself, made him a billionaire. So from his career, he made his millions off the work of other people making children's music for children's shows and cartoons. He became a multimillionaire off the work of Power Rangers. And then this made him a billionaire, which he still is to this day. So Fox Kids gets rebranded into Jetix in 2004. The Fox Family Channel becomes ABC Family. And the two shows that they did take over and continued running were Power Rangers and the Digimon franchises. Fox would rebrand their kids blocks as Fox Box, and from then on worked with 4Kids at that time. And for a while, that was pretty much it. Saban was out of the game. He became a billionaire. He sold everything, and he was done. Disney was doing Power Rangers for a while. So that's it. Just kidding. 2010, Saban goes back and buys Power Rangers again. So Disney was done with Power Rangers after the great season of RPM, and so Saban buys it back for the measly sum of $43 million. and creates a new company, Saban Brands. Power Rangers goes on to debut and air on Nickelodeon with Samurai in 2011. In 2012, Saban created the kind of forgotten programming block on the CW called Vortex after 4Kids went bankrupt. And some other interesting things that did come out here over the last decade. We got the Boom Studio Comics license for Power Rangers. Those comics are still going on. There's a lot of fun stuff in there. They decided to try the theatrical game again. In 2017, we got the revival Mighty Morphin Power Rangers film. You know what? It's okay in my mind. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's just there. However, this thing was a huge financial box office flop. One other neat little thing I do want to mention that did happen, though, was the tabletop streaming show Power Rangers Hyperforce on Twitch in 2017. It's about 25 episodes. This is in canon with Power Rangers. So if you are someone who really loves following that franchise, if this is missing from your line, well, I mean, these characters from Hyperforce have now been brought into the comics. That's a part of the franchise now. And it did feature various actors from the show. Paul Shire, who played Bulk, is Jack, the Yellow Ranger in that series. I know Christina V plays Vesper, the Black Ranger, who is great. Peter Sadarso, who was the Blue Ranger for Ninja Steel, he is also in that as the Red Ranger of that. So and other actors from out the show, Jason David Frank, Jen's actor from Time Force. A lot of actors appear through that as both their characters and even some new characters. So if you're into like watching something like Critical Role or something, you really like Power Rangers, give that a shot. But Saban then, after the failure of the 2017 movie and such, well, he decided, let's sell Power Rangers again after about 8 years. And he had made a deal with Hasbro for a new toy licensing in 2018, cutting Bandai out of the picture for the first time, much to Bandai's annoyance, of course. The deal with Hasbro, though, included their option to purchase the franchise rights, and they went for it in 2019. So they bought Power Rangers for $522 billion. Saban just kept on winning in the money game, if you're paying attention to the numbers. But so now Power Rangers is no longer with Saban, it's with Hasbro. They continued airing the series on Nick with Dino Fury and Beast Morphers. Second season Dino Fury debuted on Netflix, and the next season Cosmic Fury is coming out later this year on Netflix with the 30th anniversary special coming. And that's kind of it there for Saban Entertainment. That was them. Also, hey, thanks to Dino Fury, we now have canon gay Rangers. Saban could never. All right, so just wanted to give these right quick. These are some sources I used for this panel. Feel free to take a photo there if you want to read more about this stuff. The influencer article by Connie Buck from The New Yorker in 2010 is a very long and read. There are some wild quotes from Heim Saban and others in there. You can read more about like the corporate dealings he did with screwing over Andy Hayward at DIC and the Eisner deal and all sorts of stuff. If you really want to get into, of course, like Michael Eisner's whole tenure at Disney and how really Saban was one of the last dominoes in what caused Michael Eisner to be ousted at the Disney Corporation. The book Disney War is an incredible read. I also want to give a shout out to the great channel on YouTube by Paparina and his Knickknacks video series. He is going series by series of everything Nickelodeon aired. He is now slowly moving in from 1990 to 1991. But he's done episodes on Saban's involved series like Mysterious Cities of Gold, Inspector Gadget, Heathcliff, Mapletown, Noozles, and most recently Maya the Bee. And then once again, I'm the editor for the Rangersplain podcast. This is hosted by my partner Sid, their best friend Ashley. My partner is a lifelong Power Rangers fan. Ashley was a child who was never allowed to watch it as a child when she was younger. So it was a newbie going in with an old bee. And like I said, we're here, we're queer, and we're going to talk about some Rangers and explain them to you. We've covered a couple other shows. We've done Los Luchadores, we've done VR Troopers, and we even covered Mystic Knights. So if you want to hear some fun thoughts on those, we just got through our Neo Saban era overview, so we are almost caught up to the whole franchise. But we got a lot of fun episodes. If you're into more tokusatsu stuff, we even covered Cutie Honey the Live, and we're going to be covering Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon next month. So there's a lot of fun stuff there. We're on everywhere you can find podcasts. So enough of my shilling. Got enough time to do some Q&A. If anybody has any questions, there's a mic up here, I think. Or you just want to yell it out to me. I'll try to hear you as best I can. Yeah. Yep.
How did it sell for $522 million? How did that happen? Like, that's a lot of money. And I would expect like $52 million.
Well, So that's the thing, like Power Rangers toys are, they're not what they were in the 90s, but that's still like a huge brand. Like young kids and everything, that's still something they buy. And Hasbro with their Lightning collection, like they're making a lot. So Hasbro obviously saw value in Power Rangers. And people keep wondering, it's like, is Hasbro going to cancel the show? What are they going to do? But they're still making toys, so hey. Anybody else got a question? Yeah.
Thoughts on Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad?
So that's not a Saban show. That was actually by Nelvana adapting Gridman. And I want to say, I forget who was involved in bringing that over, but that was made as a rivalry to Power Rangers, trying to cash in on like Power Ranger success. It's weird, but I'll give at least Studio Trigger references in the title of their anime version of SSSS Gridman, which is a great show, so you should watch that. Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I watched Power Rangers up until Time Force.
Okay.
And afterwards, they were replacing the original Super Sentai footage with like some more CGI stuff. Was that alongside one of these buyouts, or?
So the buyout happened during the production, I think, while the airing of Wild Force was going on. That was the transition season from between Saban to Disney. I believe the CGI stuff, though, that was stuff Toei did on their own. I know the big influence like Saban had on Super Sentai was part of the reason Super Sentai didn't go HD throughout the 2000s. It was still airing in like 4:3 standard definition, was because Disney and Saban and Disney weren't like going into widescreen or HD during their time. Okay, I saw you next. Yeah.
So, as you mentioned about the opening dub, huge fan of the Sailor Moon dub, and we were watching Toonami. Why is the Sailor Moon dub score so hard to find?
So that also is not a Saban show, but as for Sailor Moon, I believe ADV Films did release the original DIC version dub of Sailor Moon, but it's long out of print. But it's just one of those. One thing I know with anime is like if if Toei, in that case Sailor Moon's owned by Toei, and if them and Naoko Takeuchi, they have say in what they want brought over. And most likely, Viz probably asked about it to cash in, because I remember like Funimation did do that one Dragon Box edition of the old Saban Funimation dub release. But it's one of those things like the Japanese have a say on that stuff, and if they don't want it released here, then it won't happen. All right, I think you in the back. Did you still have a question? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that Michael Eisner bought the Fox family. Is that the reason why the Simpsons is on Disney Plus?
Well, that came out later. That was the more recent deal where Disney, under Bob Iger, just outright bought Fox Studios. Okay, you still have your hand up?
Thoughts on the 2020 Digimon remake? Like, when did Saban sell Digimon to get them to be able to make a whole remake now?
Because Saban sold Digimon along with everything else with the Fox family buyouts, because, as I said, Digimon continued airing when Disney took over and rebranded to ABC Family. So I believe like Frontiers and some of those other seasons did aired on Disney originally, but I think it's just eventually, like with those kind of things, rights revert back to the Japanese license holder. So Toei probably, that's them doing it on their own for cashing in on nostalgia in Japan. As for my thoughts on 2021, was that a try? Yeah.
It's just literally adventure. It's like
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet myself. The last one I watched was Try, and I was a little let down by it, so I didn't go for that one yet. I've heard a friend of mine, he's a big Digimon fan. I've heard mixed things. Okay, yeah.
I haven't watched Power Rangers in like probably 25 years, but like in the new ones, are they still using Japanese footage, or do they do all their own stuff in-house now?
So they were, up through Dino Fury, they were still adapting Super Sentai shows. Because this has to be a Nickelodeon thing. With Nickelodeon, there were only 4 series over about that like 8 or 9 years that got adapted, because instead of doing like 40, 50 episode season a year, they were doing like 2 seasons of like 22 episodes. So you get like a season of Samurai, and the next year Super Samurai finishing the show. So because of that, it was around Megaforce. That one, the first half was, I can't remember, it's the Angel season. Yeah, Go Sager, and followed by like the second half was Go Kiger or Go Kaiger, and from there that was like the first time after that where they were able to like skip a Sentai because Go Busters kind of flopped in Japan, and Toei's like, okay, you could skip this one, and they went with what they adapted to Dino Charge, and then when Hasbro brought the show, they went back and adapted Go Busters, an older season after Ninja Steel, and turned that one into Beast Morphers. And then they went with like the most recent like dinosaur themed one. Is that Kyura Soldier? Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of Super Sentai myself, and some of these names have gotten real tongue tied. But they've kind of gone to where like they're picking and choosing. I know with the new show Cosmic Fury, they're apparently doing original costumes for that one, but they're using the robot fight footage from a Super Sentai show still. It's hard to say. I've heard like this Netflix one, it's going to be like 8 or 9 episodes, so it's going to be real short. So it's going to be, it's one of those who we'll see from here. Power Rangers has survived like being canceled like 5 times already. So, all right, anyone else got a question? Yes.
Kind of interesting to hear you talk about some of these series that Saban did in like the 80s and 90s, where you refer to them as a short run. But they run for 40 to 50 episodes, whereas, a complete season these days is more like 9, 10, 14 episodes.
Yeah, that's just a whole change in the animation industry in general, I think. But the ones I mentioned that were specifically short run, some of those TV adaptation shows, they only ran like 13 episodes, the majority of them. Like, I think Alf had like 13 episodes, Kid and Play had like 13 episodes. They're the kind of shows, they like only made like a certain slot of episodes, and then they just reran them for a couple of years and were done. Anyone else? Oh, very back.
Here's like one obscure film that I think I don't know if you've heard of, Moon Madness.
What's it called?
Moon Madness.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
Basically, it's like some French film that aired on Nickelodeon. Like they had like Saban's everything theme song to it.
Oh, okay. I'll have to look into that one. Yeah, there's all sorts of shows I did not have a chance to mention here. Like they had an adaptation of the Sweet Valley High books. That was a popular show for a couple of years in the 90s. I just didn't know where to throw that in there. I know Saban like has been doing movie production still to this day though. Like they were the distributor for that awful Jay and Silent Bob reboot film. They mostly been like distributor for a lot of like indie horror movies. It's weird, like what they've been releasing still. When you look it up, it's like, really? Anyone else? Oh, yeah.
You mentioned your least favorite things Saban's like adapted or used. What's your favorite and why?
Say that again?
You mentioned your least favorite things Saban has done. You're probably adapting and bringing over. What's your favorite project you've done?
Favorite project? Well, I still enjoy Digimon for what it is. And like I never saw it as a kid. I only saw it like literally like 2 years ago. But like I was really impressed with what Power Rangers RPM did as a show. Anyone else? All right. Well. Oh yeah.
Thank you. A follow-up question to the one I asked earlier. Of the seasons of Power Rangers that came after Time Force.
Yeah.
It started with Wild Force, I guess.
Wild Force was like the transition, and then Disney's first full series on their own was which one was it? Ninja Storm. Yeah, it's like I knew it was Hurricane was the Sentai. It was like Ninja Storm. But yeah, Wild Force was the last one Saban had input in.
Of those later seasons, would there be one to recommend to someone who loved the early ones and like?
I think.
Dino Thunder?
Well, those last 2 seasons, I enjoyed Time Force. I think Wild Force is really worth watching. But personally, what I found, like as an adult, I found like most of the Disney years, I enjoyed those a lot more than I did any of the Saban seasons myself. Outside of Operation Overdrive, which was kind of but like I really enjoyed like Jungle Fury and Mystic Force, and I really liked RPM a lot.
SPD was on pretty good.
I wasn't too big on SPD, unfortunately. I know, unpopular opinion. Yes.
Do you think Saban made the right choice selling Power Rangers?
Made him a billionaire, and then he got to go on to like he got to go on to like buy up Univision for a while and all sorts of other stuff in the 2000s. Like if you've seen The Toys Who Made Us on Netflix, he kind of goes like, oh, I wish I hadn't sold Power Rangers. What a shame. And it's like, you're a billionaire. Go cry in your money. So, no, I mean, literally, he sold it for, he made $1.5 billion himself, bought Power Rangers back for like a meager fraction of that, and then sold it for a huge amount more than what he paid for it. So he at least won out on the money, and I guess he decided he didn't care about Power Rangers anymore. He mostly does like music now and some like international distribution of TV networks. All right, if that's it though, I do want to thank everybody here for attending. Now get out. Anyway, once again, my name's Kurt, Great SG, and like I said, Ranger Explains the podcast. I edit for my partner and their best friend. Hope y'all had a good time. Thank you. This was a lot of fun. I was really glad to see everyone and having a good time.